All right, welcome back to the fourth Q&A. Housekeeping things. If you want to sign up for coaching, you can do so with the link in my bio. We are currently running a get 6 months free of training, so you can do so with the link in my YouTube bio or my Instagram bio. And don't forget to like and subscribe. So without further ado, I'll put 20 minutes on the clock, and let's get to some questions. I should be able to get to all these today. I'm getting better at being more succinct with my answers. For 1-foot jumper, should I do quarter squats or full squats? Both. Do both. You start with, you go from general to specific. You start with full squats, then you go to half squats, and then you go to quarter squats, and then you can go to rhythm quarter squats. So the answer is both. Usually full squats are going to give you a lot more of the general adaptations we're looking for. Increasing muscle cross-sectional area, probably going to be a little bit better for tendon stiffness because you're getting more strain. So you want to do, and then you can progress to rhythm quarter squat for some more of those neurological adaptations. Or you can even do super maximal eccentrics or overcoming isos. You have tons and tons of options. The specificity of 1-foot training mostly comes from just doing 1-foot jumping in your jump sessions. Thoughts on doing concentric only training while in season along with plyos/sports? I think it's a good option, especially if you have very high volumes of training in season. I think concentric only or minimal eccentric training is fine, but also keep in mind if you're doing a reduced volume of strength training anyways, and you're already used to squatting, hinging, etc., you're probably not going to get that sore from doing concentric only lifting, but it is an easy way to maintain your strength gains for the most part by doing, say, a pin squat or a box squat, and you're still moving heavy weight. You're still going to get some stimulus for hypertrophy for strength, and you're going to be less sore. So I think it's a good option. Or if you're short on time, you can do some overcoming isos or something. No, it's a good option. Speaking of, are overcoming isos better or are yielding isos better for tendon pain or the same? They're basically the same. I prefer overcoming isos simply because I think I can go a lot harder on them. I can't remember what Natera's progression is. I'm pretty sure overcoming isos are supposed to be higher up in terms of neurological stimulus than yielding isos, even though I'm sure you can go heavy with the yielding isos for like a 10-second hold. Yielding is just biasing eccentric, overcoming is biasing concentric. And remember, if we bias concentric muscle actions, that's going to get more strain on the tendon. So I would say at a given muscle length, you're probably going to get more tendon strain with the overcoming isos, because you're just able to push harder, like pushing as hard as you can into an immovable object. So I tend to bias overcoming isos, but they're basically the same. Usually yielding isos, like your typical leg extension hold or calf raise iso for 10 seconds or 30 seconds, are going to be a little bit more tolerable early on in your tendon phase rehab, but doing something like an overcoming iso or even a supermax eccentric is probably going to get more adaptation from the tendon. How to get the most out of THP? What data should I give to the coaches weekly/each cycle? Make sure, number one thing is we have to check off your lifts and especially your jump technique. Once we say your power clean looks good or your squat looks good, then you don't necessarily have to send us your lifts. If you want to, that's great, but you don't have to. Or obviously if you PR, then definitely send us your lifts just so we can hype you up or post you on our stories. And definitely send us your jump technique. That's probably the biggest thing that we do with you, is help you figure out how to jump, which is so you can immediately start jumping higher. Obviously, give us any updates if you're having any pain or if you're traveling or you have a schedule change, and then we can talk you through how to update your program to accommodate those things. Or if you, for whatever reason, don't like the progression you're on, if it's too intense or not intense enough, let us know. We can change your cycle. But I would definitely want to see athletes at least once a week. If you want to text the group chat every day, that's great. But at least check in with us once a week. Let us know everything's okay. And so get the most out of training doing those things. Do you think split squats translate better to sprinting? Great question. I might have answered this last week. I can't remember. I don't think split squats transfer better for sprinting, but they might be better for sprinters, simply because the systemic load that you're getting with doing any sort of split variation or unilateral strength work is going to be less than bilateral. meaning you're going to be less fatigued from the session. You'll recover a little bit faster, even though during the session it might suck. You'll recover a little bit faster, and you'll be able to sprint with higher quality. I know some coaches would say that split stance is better for fascial development, and the jury's kind of out on that one. Who really knows if that's the case? Sure, I can concede that point. It's going to be better for lateral hip stability, hip co-contractions, and hip stability. They're going to have a much greater demand on the adductors and abductors when you're in those split stance positions, which is good for sprinting. I don't necessarily think they transfer better, but I think they're definitely a useful tool for sprinters because they're probably going to be less fatigued from doing unilateral work because you just have less load on the bar. They're hard to perform, and you have more time under tension, but it's just systemically less fatiguing. And so you're probably going to get higher quality sprint sessions, which will drive, of course, adaptations to sprinting faster. You want to try and run over 90% of your true max velocity consistently every week and get those exposures to continue to get faster. So I think the transfer is good there. I would say the research, though, that I've seen, it's pretty much a wash between bilateral and unilateral because you're going to get structural adaptations from both. You're probably going to get a greater systemic response, a greater neural drive response from doing bilateral work just because you're more stable. So I think they're both very useful. And if you'd rather do unilateral or split variations versus bilateral, I think that's fine. It doesn't really matter that much. Do Victory insoles work? No. I don't have them here. I do actually have Victory insoles. I've worn them on and off for 5 years. I don't think people know this, and I probably should make a video because that reminds me I should make a video on this. No, they don't really work. It's more of a new toy effect. You get the insole. The shoe feels a little bit stiffer, so you might increase your vert by like half an inch to an inch just because you're excited. You placeboed your way into thinking you're jumping higher, but does it increase your vertical by 2.5 inches or 4 inches like the guys claim or the guys who promote Victory insoles claim? No. There's actually, it's funny, there is a research paper on this. I don't cite it off the top of my head, but they looked at, so what they did was they broke in the Victory insoles for like 2 weeks. They had them wear them in their shoes. So they kind of new toy effect. And they found no difference in jump height between like insoles in the shoes versus not wearing them in the shoes. You got to remember, like when they do that little snappy thing where they like fold the shoe in half and the shoe springs up, you don't deform that much you're not getting that much deformation of the insole when you're actually jumping or sprinting. It's very, very, and the other thing they don't talk about is the weight. The Victory insoles weigh a ton. Like they are a freaking brick in your shoe. So that is probably the biggest downside is the weight is bad. I mean, I tried the blacks and those are a little bit better. I think you have like foot and you want to use them as more of an purpose. It can be decent. Like I think maybe with athletes with plantar fasciitis, it might help out a little bit because the insole can absorb some of that tension. But I think that's one of the things they claim. I haven't really looked into it. But for bounce and stuff, no, it doesn't make you faster. It doesn't make you jump higher. I've had my best jumping days without the insoles in. Like I hit my first East Bay in college without the insoles in. I don't wear them anymore. And I've been jumping great and I've been jumping pretty well lately. So no, they don't work. Don't waste your money. It's just kind of a placebo effect. They're really fragile. Like if you start to really wear them every day, like for games, they will break pretty easily. Like that fiber will get some wear and tear on it. So it doesn't work. And even in research would support that too, which is good. Do you program your training and do you play ball or just train? I just train right now. I used to play in a men's league after I got done playing college ball my first year or two at PT school. I might start playing it next year, but I really just want to train right now and I really want to touch 12 feet. Like once I touch 12 feet, then I'll probably get back into playing some more recreational sports, but I want to hit my goal first. And then I can get back into playing basketball once a week. I could play basketball once a week if I wanted to and with my current setup, but I just don't want to. How upper body is important for sprinting, not just jumping. It's still important. There's definitely kind of like Charlie Francis says, there's definitely like an organism strength component to it. And, only trained 3 times a week as a sprinter and you take all the rest of the days off, like you would be out of shape. Like you need to be able to do something on your off days, whether that's tempo, whether that's upper body mobility work. So you got to have something in there just to increase your general fitness. And I think upper body training is a really good way to do that. There's an arm swing component to sprinting. You balance out the angular momentum of your legs. And I think having a strong upper body does play a role in balancing out, the forces that your lower body is generating. And there's a stability component to being able to do weighted pull-ups, even to being able to bench or, clapping push-up or doing some throws. Like there's whole body movement that some people might give it credit for, especially if you're doing certain body routines. So I would say you should have it in there, but you don't necessarily need to be ripping the tries, right? Like just the compound movements, you'll build a little bit of muscle and it'll probably end up helping you. And like, just look at elite sprinters, like a lot of them are pretty jacked, like they're pretty built. And a lot of them, Noah Lyles, they do train their body and it works for them. So I would say it would help, or it certainly wouldn't hurt unless you get gigantic. Technique tips for getting knee to D on a 2-foot jump. Well, that's going to depend on how fast you can recover your block foot. When we say getting knee to knee, that means we want the knees to be in line once the plant leg touches down. That's what we mean by knee to knee. That just means that you're getting your block foot around fast enough so you can get to double support as quickly as possible without hopping. You do want to be in single support for a little bit, but you don't want to hop into your jump. Otherwise, you're just going to blow through your plant. So I just think about getting your last 2 feet, like getting your last 2 steps down quickly, like that. And in part, you're going to be able to do that if you time your penultimate correctly and you start pushing once your hips pass over your knee on support of the penultimate, because then you're also going to get a nice stretch reflex in your hip flexors that will be able to send your block foot forward so you can actually time that plant and block foot correctly. How come pro athletes' muscles can remain quasi-isometric amid forces exceeding 20 times body weight? Excellent question. And the answer is coordination. It's for one, they also, like for 20 times body weight would be like a triple jump. They're not getting very much knee bend, so it's easy for the tendon to be able to take up that MTU length change. And they are coordinated. They develop pre-tension before ground contact. They have co-contractions happening. So the muscles already performing work before you're even hitting the ground. Like if you look at EMG studies or have EMG like on like a drop jump, you'll see the muscles like the agonist, like your quads, and the antagonist, the hamstrings, they're both firing at like 70% of what the peak EMG amplitude will be before contact. So you consciously do, it's a skill you develop through thousands and thousands of jump reps. But that way, once you hit the ground and experience insane forces, the muscle has already taken up slack in the tendon. The agonist is contracting, so the joint can be really, really, and then you might hit the ground. You'll get a tiny stretch in the muscle, because the other thing that pre-tension does, and I have a video coming out on this, I think probably this week is when I'll do it. It alpha gamma motor loop, and that will pull the muscle spindles very taut. So a very quick, tiny stretch of the muscle can send a massive signal to the spinal cord, and that will aid the voluntary component that was already performing work, and now you get a spinal neural augmentation, and the muscle's also in a strong position to produce force, to its optimal length, and that's how they're able to remain quasi-isometric. It's a learned skill. But keep in mind, co-contractions don't happen throughout the entirety of the stance phase. It's basically just at initial contact, like maybe 40 milliseconds or so, and then the antagonist will relax, so the agonist can actually perform work and accelerate the joint quickly. How tall am I? I'm 6'6" shoes, and I'm probably pushing 6'7" with shoes. From proximal, what is most important? Speed, eccentric contact strength, tendon stiffness. That's a very loaded question. I don't think I have time to answer that. I would go back to what I was previously saying, and I would say what's most important is coordination in a specific motor task. Like, we can do lots of things in the weight room to augment your structure, your neural capacities, motor stuff like that, but coordination in the specific task is probably the number one thing. Like, you have to run fast to get fast. You have to jump high, or you just got to jump a lot to jump high. And augment that by increasing your muscle cross-sectional area, your rate of force development, your tendon stiffness, your connective tissue stiffness, all the things. And you can decrease neural inhibition, but you have to be coordinated in your tasks. I would say that's probably the number one thing for athletic performance is you have to have a background in, the athletic performance is not lifting weights or Olympic lifting even though we love those things. The background is a history of jumping, of sprinting, of doing plyometric contacts, of playing multiple sports. Like an athlete, that is the background that you want to have. Should sprinters do slower tempo supermaximal eccentrics and what are the benefits? I would say yes. So slow supermaximal eccentrics are the precursor to some of roll stuff with the eccentrically overloaded, like very, very fast. Doing supermaximal eccentrics is going to increase your eccentric capacity. It's going to do things like increase fascicle length to help prevent muscle pulls and potentially help produce higher power or technically more force at a given it's more force at a given fascicular shortening velocity. Basically help and also help to shorten faster if it needs to do that. Not all muscles have to shorten fast to sprint fast because you have the tendon component and it's more quasi isometric. But a progression you use to get into like plyometric type activity or the squats, like a double multi-response. That's what we're looking for. The multi-response squats, like with the bands. So yes, and keep in mind, like there's a neural control component. Like I don't know if it's a theory or a fact, but the brain controls eccentric contractions differently than it controls concentric contractions. So doing accentuated eccentrics is a way to improve your ability to handle all these braking forces that you will experience in sprinting or in jumping. And like Virgoshansky taught that, or I guess it was Natalia Virgoshansky talked about that in one of her presentations that I thought was pretty interesting. So that would be a part of the progression of doing eccentric strength training. Do you know anything about Hoffa's fat pad impingement? Yes, I do know a lot about Hoffa. Not a lot, but I do know some stuff about Hoffa's fat pad impingement. You treat it mostly like a tendinopathy. Usually helps the Hoffa's fat pad, and sometimes I know the gal that's Claire. I think it's Claire Robertson is like that's one of the famous clinicians that deals with Hoffa's fat pad. I took one of her courses. Ice massage can help acutely with fat pad stuff, but you treat it mostly like a tendon. You want to avoid extension, especially hyperextension. So if you're doing like leg isos, you don't want to do it with a straight knee. You want to do it with a bent knee, like kicking into a pad. Wears around the house, because barefoot will put you in too much extension and that can flare things up. That's like acutely. You obviously have to do it the entire time, but it's very, very to a tendon. Outside taping usually helps it, and ice might help it. So you can try those things. I have really long femurs. Tips to improve explosiveness for jumping and sprinting. Well, if you have long femurs, then you better get under that barbell and start squatting. Not necessarily barbell, but getting stronger is the best thing you can do with long levers, because if you increase your squat strength by 5 or 10 pounds, you produce a heck of a lot more force than somebody with short femurs. So that's why we say like longer land. It's a disadvantage from a physics standpoint for the most part, but it's an advantage because you're going to get a lot better transfer from the weight room. So get stronger and increase your rate of force development. Become a put monster. That's what we tell people. If I can't do cleans at my gym at all, is trap bar jump a good alternative? How do you load it? How many reps, etc.? Well, you could be able to do cleans at your gym. You just won't be able to drop it. I'm sure you bought some shock mats. They would let you drop it. But doing a trap bar jump, just use like 20 to 30% of your squat 1 rep max. And then you can go from concentric only to counter movement to like repeated counter movement and just follow the same sets of reps as it would as a clean. How to dunk off the dribble if my highest jumps with my right leg off one and I'm right-handed. Well, that's difficult. I would tell you to learn the dunk with your left. If you're a right foot jumper and you're trying to dunk with your right hand, either learn the jump off your left leg or learn the dunk with your left hand. That makes a lot easier and you'll be able to reach a lot higher. I see that I'm almost out of time, but I think I'll be able to get to the rest of these. What's the best order to do these exercises? Plyo, sprints, weightlifts. I was sprints, plyos, weightlifting. Or you can go sprints and then you can do contrast sets with weightlifting and plyos. How to treat adductor tendonitis. It's kind of how you treat pretty much any tendon. It's not really... You start with isos, and then you progress to harder isos, and then you can progress to like more activities like slider adduction or cable adduction. I put athletes I like to say I come back to the scene of the crime pretty soon. Once it calms down after doing some isos, like say some ball squeeze isos or some Copenhagen isos, I'll get them sprinting on like tempo. I'll do some tempo work, which is usually what flares it up. I'll do tempo work along with some cable adductions or some slider adductions, the lunge stuff. I'll have them doing that pretty early on and just more graded exposure. Because a lot of that, like the hip is so global too, where like you can't even just look at what's my, adductor tendonitis. I'm just gonna, or adductor or tendinopathy or groin pain. An issue with your core. It could be an issue with you can't hip hinge and access internal rotation. Like the hip is like very unique, where it's a really global thing. So you can't just look at locally at the tissue. Yes, you want to look locally at the tissue to calm it down, but I would also make sure, can you hip hinge? Can you squat with like good, can you get and prevent your knees diving in? Like, do you have the motor control to maintain external rotation? There's a whole lot of things like I probably look at your pelvic orientation when you're running, or super anterior tilted, or do you have good pelvic control? Like, can you do that in an isolated setting in an RDL? Hip is a huge for a lot of hip issues. And then the other thing would just be looking at the lateral hip too, because that also helps to support the adductors. It's like, well, I'm getting adductor tendinopathy, but it's because I can't create co-contractions when I'm during collisions, like when I'm landing. So it's like, okay, well, also have to get the lateral hip stronger. We also have to do more graded exposure to, things like depth drops. And now we got to do some split stance depth drops because you got to be in more of a single leg support. Or a asymmetric bilateral support. Hopefully that answered some of your questions, but just treat it like any other tendon. Great exposure, strength, energy storage and release. Start with depth drops, progress to higher drops, and progress back to jumping. Do some tempo sprinting if that doesn't bother. If you have any major range of motion limitations in internal or external rotation or abduction, adduction, you can do some dynamic mobility work as long as it doesn't bother it. Should I transition to 2 feet as a basketball player? I have a history of knee pain. Yes, I really recommend teen sport athletes, basketball especially, to be more of a 2-foot jumper, just because, especially at the college level, you got to learn how to play off of 2 feet anyways. So it's to your advantage if that is also your strong plant. One's fine for like fast, or if you need to catch like a claw, a fast break, but 2 foot, you're going to be able to finish through contact. You're probably get a lot more posters, and you're probably going to reduce your risk of any sort of traumatic injuries. Because you're more stable in the air when you're getting hit. So I would say definitely transition to 2 foot, and it's usually better for longevity, especially if you have knee pain, because 1 foot's a lot more intense. Should I do any additional stretching after slow and isometric lifts for tendon rehab? You can if you want to, as long as it doesn't make your tendon mad. I want to start back training, but now I'm overweight. What do I do first? Go to the gym or cardio first? Do both. You can easily lift and do cardio and just get back in general physical condition. And as you intensify your training and eat a healthy diet, you'll lose weight. And that was all the questions we had today. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week.